The lights or something, aren't they? So I think we're ready to begin. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We're going to do this pretty straightforward. I'm going to introduce myself. The panel will introduce themselves. And then we're going to move into some questions we've put together to get some things going. But we'd love to get questions from you. And they tell me this wonderful interactive iPad's going to give me questions from all of you. And the panel is ready and waiting. It's a little bit different than some of the other things you've heard. So I'm Margaret Smith. I'm a senior managing director at Accenture. I have been there for what feels like a lifetime, because it kind of is, 36 years. I did all the consulting stuff, the outsourcing stuff. I've worked around the globe in Europe, Turkey, which kind of gets to be half and half, and the US. And currently, for the last 8 years, I run a lot of the internal functions. So I run payroll, time and expense, all of our real estate, everybody in our real estate, procurement, but most importantly, I run our sustainability agenda. So our CEO has declared net zero 2025, and I'm responsible for executing that. I retire on January 6th, so I will be heading off, but telling her she has met her agenda of 2025. So with that, Scott.
Yeah. So Scott Blackburn, I'm a senior partner at McKinsey here in Washington, D.C. I'm the chairman of our McKinsey's U.S. government entity. I joined the firm 20 years ago after time in the military. I'm a fourth generation military veteran, Army veteran. My nephew, Sean, is the fifth right now, so it kind of runs through our family. And I originally started in the Cleveland office and worked all with private sector companies. And then in 2014, I had my kind of midlife crisis, and I left McKinsey and to serve my country again. And I came to Washington, just a few blocks from here, and to attempt to be part of the team that turned around the VA after a big scandal that the VA had in 2014. So I stayed at the VA in a couple of different senior roles for 4 years, and then I returned to McKinsey in 7 years ago, 2018, and have been focused on U.S. government, but also I think pertains to this. I lead our global veterans initiatives and a lot of our global economic mobility efforts in opportunity creation.
Cool.
Yeah.
Maria.
Hey everyone, Maria Fernandez. I lead Indirect Procurement at HelloFresh. And in case you don't know what we do, we basically provide you food that you could cook at home or just pop into your microwave and eat it. Prior to that, I was at McKinsey as a partner where I co-led our sustainability and life sciences practice. But my journey to sustainability was not always straightforward. So I started off doing a lot of procurement and tech work. And then I was like, I see this big problem out there that I can solve with these skill sets I have. And so I brought them together. And then last year was a lot of soul searching. My dad very suddenly passed away. And so I was like, how do I move from an advisor to an operator? And then I joined HelloFresh. And now I'm at a company where sustainability is at its core. So quite excited about the impact I can have. And so far it's been 9 months, but pretty good.
Awesome. Roger.
Yeah, well, my name is Roger Ford. I'm also with Accenture. I've been there 28 years, and I'm one of those career consultants. So before I came to Accenture, I was also with another consulting company. And I've worked around many different groups, whether it be government, financial services, oil and gas. But I'm here today to really talk about kind of the capstone of my career, and that has been leading our Accenture Development Partnerships practice, helping to grow that from what I'll say a small employee-driven initiative out of the UK into a global practice that focuses on driving social and environmental impact around the world. We've worked with hundreds of organizations, many corporate clients, and really we exist to change the world, to advance the agenda around the Sustainable Development Goals. So leading this work gets me up every day. I'm coming to work excited, as well as my colleagues, to do this amazing work. And consulting companies are great machines in setting up the infrastructure to deliver this type of impact. So excited to tell you more about it.
So I know I told you guys I was going to run this way and then that way. Ignore everything I said. I'm right in the middle. I've already screwed it up, so we're just going to go with it. Scott, when we think about, I mean, I'm sitting here listening to Accenture and McKinsey repeatedly, and the HelloFresh thing is a wonderful, different twist. But I struggle sometimes to see us as good business, good community operators. So when we look at sustainability through the lens of what you do at McKinsey, what does that look like?
I think it's core to everything that we do. And very similar to Accenture, I think similar values, the two firms. We exist to change the world, and we recruit people, and people come into the firm wanting to make a difference in the world. And we have a two-part mission. One is to make our clients successful. The other one is create an unrivaled environment for our talent and people to develop. And as we think about that, and as Maria, as you remember, as we thought about like our corporate strategy, we started using the term sustainable inclusive growth, right? As far as like those three things, whether it is client work, whether it is corporate responsibility work, or whether it is developing our own people, we want there to be growth, because growth is helpful, growth is oxygen, growth is opportunities. We want it to be inclusive. There's a lot of different ways that you could do that around the road, and we want to create that environment. And we want it to be sustainable, right? And whether that is, you define that by the environment, or whether you define that a little bit more broadly, as I tend to think about, is like you are creating sustainable workforces. You are creating sustainable businesses that are going to endure and that are going to do great work. So I think both firms and companies all around the place, like you can do good or do well by doing good, I think is the term, and it has been very helpful for us.
So Maria, I'm going to change it up a bit again. So just for something we've prepared, I'm not going to go that way. You said something really interesting when you gave your introduction. You said HelloFresh has sustainability at its core. So when you think about, the simple question, how do you marry up sustainability in a corporate context? Talk.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that attracted me to HelloFresh was just the mission, right? It's the way, our mission is to change the way people eat forever. And if you think about it, the amount of food waste in the typical retail supply chain, it's about 10% of the food is wasted. Versus at HelloFresh, because we're sending you pre-portioned meals, it's 1%. And so there's already a huge environmental impact you see just from that. And then the other part of it is, even though we have food waste, a lot of that is then sent to people who actually need the food. So we've crossed like 10 million meals that we've donated to communities in need, which makes me feel, it's good for profitability, it's good for the communities around, it's good for the planet. And I think for us at the core, it's around planet, people, and profitability. Because we need, obviously, to grow, we need to be able to survive and compete, but we want to do it in a way where it makes sense to the people around us and for the planet.
So Roger, when you think through, because having spoken now to you and Scott, your roles in the two consulting firms are actually quite different. When you think through Accenture development partnerships, what is the sustainability in that? Because the entire thing is about big S sustainability. What is it that you're delivering in a corporate context? I look at everybody here as a student looking for what could be their path. When you think about what you are doing and living in a corporate context with sustainability, what does that look like for ADP?
Yeah, and I think you have to go back to almost our roots to answer that question. One is that civil society, NGOs, and other organizations around the world never had access to business and technology skills at scale. They would struggle to get a little pro bono work here or there to advance their missions, and ultimately these are the biggest missions in the world, to advance the sustainable development goals, to make the world a better place, but they couldn't access consulting skills. So the idea was, how can we make those skills available just in time? Someone could pick up the phone at Save the Children and talk to our best consultant, get their problem answered, get a team on the ground, but do it in a way that was sustainable, where it wasn't free, it wasn't pro bono, but it certainly wasn't at the highest price, you would charge a big corporation. That's where it all started. But what we found by doing this work is we stumbled upon something very unique, and that was the ability to go across these sectors to start creating dialogues amongst and across and now it seems kind of simple probably as you're thinking about this, getting NGOs, donors, and corporations to work together, to talk together along with governments, because none of these problems can be solved on their own by one sector, right? The private sector isn't going to take on high-risk projects around the world without getting blended finance from the government or other organizations to de-risk projects. And the NGOs, no one knows the people and the problems better than NGOs. So if you mix those things together, you get a secret sauce, a special way of delivering and solving problems. And we need to be doing a lot more of that as a world. But the thing, just to close out Margaret's question, is we call it 360-degree value at Accenture, meaning a corporation is not only about growth and profits and serving its customer, but also about the way it can create a sustainable path forward, the way it can protect the planet, the way it can employ diverse workforces and engage communities. And that's where we come in. We complete the circle for Accenture. So our commercial teams are out there delivering some of the best operating and business model work in the world and technology. But what they're missing often is that piece of inclusive business that we come in, my team, working alongside them to create that final piece that creates the circle around the corporate or the client's aspirations.
Okay, I love that. So Scott, we've got one directly for you. So now I really am switching out of our plan. You mentioned sustainability is embedded in everything McKinsey does. Can you share a few examples?
Yeah, well, I think a couple of examples that I'll use is even, and I like what Roger was talking about is when you're talking about kind of like the mix of work that like you do at Accenture, and it's something that we do. Like our primary, we obviously have our paying clients, but even as we're thinking about developing our people, I've done probably over 24 pro bono strategy engagements, mostly for veterans organizations, but also for organizations like Opportunity at Work and Braven and others that are doing amazing things in our community that every single day. And it's great for be able to sustain those communities, develop workforces, et cetera. But also it keeps the energy up of our people, right? Like it helps them develop. Because when you get to do work with a nonprofit as a more junior colleague, I think about my second engagement at the firm almost 20 years ago was with a small nonprofit called University Circle Incorporated when I lived in Cleveland. And I'm in there working as a brand new McKinsey person with a CEO and helping them think through how to make a more sustainable like arts and culture district in the middle of Cleveland. That's kind of like where I started learning about how to counsel CEOs and everything like that. It really kind of like filled my bucket, helped me develop. And the more opportunities that you can provide those, I think is absolutely fantastic. You're asking specifically about like sustainability in on our client work, very similar to Accenture. And you mentioned the 360 framework. We have a framework that we call holistic impact, as well. And before every single engagement that we do with every single one of our clients is we walk through with our client and with our team so everybody understood what does success look like for this. There's financial metrics, like there might be a cost savings goal of a procurement thing, by the way, but also there's an impact on the customers, impact on your suppliers, impact on the culture of the organization, impact on the sustainability of the community and the environment that you're doing. And we ask every single one of these questions. And is it in every single thing? I would say there's elements in every single thing, but we're always constantly in that dialogue with every single one of our clients about what can we do to, on this issue.
I love that. So I'm cheating a bit now, like I haven't done that before. But Maria, I've got one for you that I happen to, because of our conversation about Chennai, I think you might be perfect for. Sustainability is frequently considered something only the first world has the ability to focus on. How do you reconcile sustainability with the economic impact?
So it's interesting because when we started serving life sciences clients on the topic of sustainability, and we found that 90% of the emissions sit in the supply chain, and a large part of the supply chain is actually sitting in India and China. And then we were like, how do you actually, work with these suppliers to make that change? And a lot of times they were like, hey, we actually need the investment to make these things happen, and unless you pay us more, we're not going to be able to do it. And on this, maybe just on a personal note, I also run my dad's company in India. We make auto components for tractors. And it's interesting there because they're doing small things around just how do you improve like the sustainability of these parts, and how do you use reusable packaging. And it comes down to a very basic thing where they were like, can you just do this? And we were like, no, it's actually additional cost because we use more boxes and there's more trips and there's more volume. And that's when I think I also appreciated, what the suppliers are going through, especially in these countries where the margins are super thin. They're not able to charge the premium that maybe we sit here in the US and we can command. And I think it's about how do you actually make the case where it's NPV positive for the suppliers in those regions, but you also help them, educate them, and tell them what do you need to do. And I think at HelloFresh also we could see differences between geographies. I think Europe obviously is kind of charging the way there versus like the US, I think we're kind of catching up now. But it's I think still core to our mission, and for us we can't have growth without sustainability. So it's almost like dual parts.
Interesting though, because there's an acceptance that we're going to pay more. I mean, what I'm hearing threaded through that is there's an acceptance that there's a cost to this, and it's one that we all have to own up to and get on board with. And the answer on the first world versus the rest of the universe is, yeah, we're going to have to pay more, and we're going to have to lift as we go, is what I'm hearing from you. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Roger, switching back, you guys have given me such great questions that I can just totally ignore our pre-prepared thing, but it's harder for these guys because they're having to catch up. When we think about sustainability, if people aren't in a leadership role, but they're passionate, right? And we can assume if they're in this room, they're pretty passionate about the topic. And I just want to, for a moment, just remind everybody, sustainability, can we just remember what the definition is, right? Because sustainability, like I was stupid about 5 years ago before we signed our net zero pledge. For me, it was entirely environmental, right? And it is so much more than environmental, right? It is social justice. It is, lifting people up. It is an entirely wider spectrum. And if you look at the SDGs, you can see that, right? They cross every spectrum almost of humanity. And so with that big lead-in, Roger, what advice would you give employees who champion sustainability and yet don't have a seat at the table because they just arrived yesterday?
Yeah, well, that I'm going to put that in the Accenture context because, it's the one that I use every day. We have first of all, people start engaging with us even before they've ever joined the company. If they have an interest, I hear from them. And my team hears from them, often as interns, but often even just people of interest in the community. I sit on the Society for International Development Board locally, which also engages the community. So start getting a lot of interested parties very early in their career process. When they eventually and hopefully join our company, those who have an interest in this type of work, in societal or environmental sustainability or creating impact or mission-driven work, purpose-driven work, you name it, whatever you want to call it, they come forward. And we at Accenture have a lot of different programs for doing that. I run this one called Accenture Development Partnerships, which is probably our largest, most well-known program outside of the CSR objectives themselves. But we have opportunities, we call it the volunteer community. So we have, I think there's 7,000 Accenture people in the volunteer community. That community gets together almost like an employee resource group throughout the year to talk about topics, to hear the latest on some of the SDGs, what we're doing, ask questions. A lot of those questions sometimes involve about how they can get involved. Those that have further interest typically end up coming forward to me or my team and saying, I want to work on one of these projects. What can I do? Here's my skill set. We wish we could accommodate everyone, but again, it's a supply-demand dynamic with our clients. But we bring on a lot. So last year alone, we had over 1,500 people working on client-funded work. And then we had this greater community doing research, supporting other types of activities that support the communities as well as the mission. And then people join our core team. That's people around the globe that do this full time, that want to actually go out and sell and deliver consulting for these types of clients, these types of cross-sector partnerships, and everything in between. And then these hundreds, thousands of other people who come on board when we need people who have deep AI skills, or someone who's a deep expert, let's say, in a certain type of M&A or other type of strategy or technology. They'll come on board, they'll do the project, and then they'll roll back into commercial, what we call it, or into their day job. But the beauty of this is it's a fully integrated part of a career. It's not stepping away or looking like it's any less intense. In fact, our projects, sometimes people say these are the most intense efforts they've ever been involved with, but they're passionate about it and they go out of their way. So I'd say in front of Margaret, we have some of the highest engagement and highest client satisfaction scores anywhere in our company because of the people and their passion for getting the job done and exceeding expectations.
Yeah, I love that. Scott, we hear frequently how much an individual can and should do to maintain a sustainable future. The reason I'm throwing this your way is because of your time in the government and your veteran status. What do you think is an organization, a government, and a community's responsibility to sustainability?
That's a great question. I think it's all of our responsibilities, and I think it's all of our responsibilities as humans, and let's not forget, like, our governments and our organizations are made up of humans that really want to make a difference. So I would say, and one of the things when I was in government that because I came in with like zero government experience other than my military experience, but like I remember the incredible burden that government employees felt of like having to, at the VA it was care for veterans, and but I'll use that as an example. There's a lot of people in the world who care about veterans, right? And as the government, one of the questions I was asking is, what are we doing to mobilize all these different, and it's not just nonprofits, there's veterans nonprofits that are absolutely amazing that you all have likely heard of. But there's the companies as well deeply care about, like, look at what Howard Schultz, as the CEO of Starbucks, did for veteran employment, or Jamie Dimon, with veteran hiring, or Wells Fargo, or all of these companies that are just incredible. Look at universities. Obviously George Washington being one, but like, Syracuse University, I was up there a couple of weeks ago, and they have an institute for veterans and military families that are, Stanford, the Gordian Knot Center on these are people that care about our future. They care about, so I think one of the things in government is around how do you actually not just run your agency, but how do you leverage the power of an entire country to be able to kind of like accomplish some of these goals.
I love that. You said something interesting, Maria, when you were talking about, you didn't say midlife crisis, but in my head I heard midlife questioning crisis thing going on.
We all have it, yeah.
How do you, well, it wasn't a crisis, it was a reckoning and a thought process. How do you balance personal values with company values? And if they diverge, how do you help them align, especially if you're a junior employee?
So I think for me, maybe if I think back to my McKinsey days, right? I was doing a lot of procurement and tech work, so it meant a lot of cost savings, a lot of like efficiency, automation, and things like that. And I went out, this was, during COVID, I had my first kid, and I was like, okay, this is great, this is fulfilling, it's stuff I can measure, I can see the impact, it's clearly moving, things for my clients, but what else? And that's when I had a client who had been serving for, I think, 8 years. And she was like, oh, I have this big problem around sustainability. Like, we have these crazy goals. The team doesn't quite know how to get there. And she was leading procurement. And I was like, okay, I don't know as much about sustainability. I've done a bit of work in my past, like back in India, around like wastewater treatment and things like that. But let me go and study about this. and figure it out. So I just called a bunch of people at the firm and I was like, teach me everything you know, I'm here to learn. And then I was like, okay, there's a big part of it which is about working with your suppliers and influencing them. The data is messy and people don't know where to focus. I know those two pieces well. How do I bring it to a place where it can actually have a bigger impact? And then we started doing these projects around dual missions. So it was around reducing cost and reducing carbon. And then that at least made me feel a little more fulfilled. So I was still doing, a large part of my work was around cost efficiency, but there was kind of this growing piece of it which was around sustainability. And I think as, I also went through this journey last year of okay, how do I get more into the operator role? How do I get closer to the business, not just an advisor? And I started looking at companies where, for whom sustainability was kind of at the core. Because then I felt like it was more aligned. So even though I do a lot of cost work, and if you guys have been following, I think right now it's about how do we get cost out, reinvest in our product, that will help with growth. But I can also see in things we do, whether it's renewable energy or recycling of our personal protective equipment, little things that actually have an impact. So it drives down cost, but also has an impact on the environment. Also thinking about when we work with organizations around food and kind of making sure people get their meals on time, that gives me meaning. And so I think for each of you, I would just think about, it doesn't have to be squarely in the space of sustainability, but anything you do, I think, can have a flavor of it.
So I love that because what I watched you go through was your own developing reckoning on what you felt was important and then molding a career and your client work around it. So I think that there's a really interesting message there around how much control you have over the path you take. And it's not like a ski lift where you get on and you end up at the top, right? It might have worked that way 30 years ago when I started, or 35 years ago, but it doesn't work that way anymore. You get on the lift and then you get to decide which path you're taking, and you get to morph and change as you grow, because you're not who you will be at 40, 50, 60. Because I can tell you that the student who was at GW is not the woman who is sitting here today. Nobody would have predicted where I ended up. So we're going to keep going, and that's another story over a glass of wine. Roger, can we answer this one outside the Accenture universe? According to research, Gen Z prioritizes working in organizations that emphasize social impact. Yes, that is absolutely true. How can companies adapt to meet those expectations in an authentic way? I mean, if you're advising clients or anybody else, what else can companies do besides what we've done with Accenture Development Partnerships? What are the other things we can think about?
Yeah, well, I do think, an attractive workplace that has a purpose is extremely important. It has worked for us, and essentially being able to attract the best talent into an organization by allowing opportunities to go beyond the day job, to go into activities that have a purpose, whether it be, in our case, volunteering or community engagement. We call it Season of Impact now, where during the course of the year, people go out in various ways and do projects. It could be what I'm telling you with Accenture Development Partnerships, or it could be other activities in the community. We do Day of Service, where we all team up with charitable organizations around DC, typically in our office here, but it's also done, I believe, around the country.
It is.
And we go out and we do projects, and that's really what allows employees to be fulfilled. I also think having strong employee resource groups where people can get together and talk both similar and diverse opinions in a safe way, I think builds camaraderie and builds trust amongst this new generation. It's all about an opportunity to feel safe, I think, and have a workplace that just makes that part of the feeling you get every time you open up the door. We try to have that in our company, and I see a lot of companies have gone down that pathway. And that's why it's so important. It's not just carbon credits and net zero and things like that. It's actually things that appeal to a broad variety of personal interests and the impact that people want to have. making people feel empowered, making people feel important, making people feel that they are the product. That's what we try to do at Accenture. Like, we sell people, right? We're a services business. So I try every day to make sure my people feel that they are the most important thing to me. They are what I count on every day, and we all are in this together. And I think you need to make sure that your leaders, and I advise any company, make sure your leadership is more than just, you haven't done your task, or you need to show up here or do this or that. It's actually one that goes beyond. And again, I'll use that 360 degree. You need to be a 360 degree leader. It's not just about showing up and tasking employees anymore. It's about giving them an environment that they can be part of.
Yeah, the word that's coming to mind is purpose.
Purpose, yeah.
It's all about purpose. So you're going to get the trick question.
All right.
So I'm sorry, but kind of Accenture McKinsey, I had to land it with you, didn't I? There's about 10 questions here that I'm ducking on AI, but I got to stop ducking all the AI questions. How is the growing use of AI changing employee wellness and job satisfaction?
Yeah, it's ever evolving. Like I actually relate it to, I graduated college in 1999, which was, if you think about, there's been like really over the past like 50 years, 3 massive disruptions. The first one was in the early 80s with the, when computers became personal computers, right? So like, I remember going up I was in like 2nd or 3rd grade where they put like the Apple IIc on our desk and we started.
I used to take, when I took my PC home, it was like a brick.
Yep.
And I had to sign it out. And you went home and I needed someone to help me carry it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then by the time I graduated high school, I remember going to college as a freshman and getting something called an email. And
literally we're 10 years apart, we must be. 'Cause
Yeah.
my 18th birthday present was an electric typewriter.
Yeah. And in high school, we still had typing class and everything like that. And so I remember being in college when the internet started exploding. So there was the PCs, there was the internet, and now we have AI. And these are kind of like the 3 technical revolutions that have happened over. And so for the students out here, I can kind of relate as being, I was in the middle I was a student when we were having the internet revolution. And with that, there was a lot of good things and there was a lot of bad things coming out of that. I remember, luckily I was going into the military because I was doing ROTC at the time. But like a lot of my friends went into all these internet startups and some of them worked out. Some companies called Google and stuff like that ended up 90% of them busted, and like these people were out of jobs. And so there will be, by the way, an AI bubble coming up over the next couple of years. But fundamentally, it absolutely changed the way that we work, and we're already seeing that, particularly with our entry-level and younger associates. And it's not eliminating them, it's actually quite the difference. It is empowering them, and it is incredibly inspiring. And like I don't know how Accenture's thinking about it, but McKinsey's doubling down on our entry-level like analyst, and because they're more savvy in this, they understand this. Like, I've learned over the past year, and some of you will laugh at me, some of you will wonder what I'm talking about, right? But like when agentic AI and the use of agents, and it started like earlier this year with like, oh my gosh, I have this agent that will rewrite my emails so that they actually make sense versus kind of like what I'm writing at 11 o'clock at night, right? And now kind of the ability to, we have our partner meeting, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary next week in Chicago. And I literally have like, here are the 15 AI modules that I need to do before, which are gonna improve the way that I work and take out menial tasks in that. So it's making us more effective. It's allowing even our entry-level people to work at the top of their license. Any like research that it used to take 2 weeks of people to go do and make phone calls and stuff like that. We have an internal AI platform called Lily that is our kind of like GBT, kind of like version that takes all of our knowledge and distills it down. And people are able to do in hours what they used to have to do in weeks. So what do you then do to repurpose that time is kind of like the big question. And it's allowing people to think, move faster. And yes, there will be like companies that emerge from this that are winners. There will be some that will be busts. It's going to be a super interesting next couple of years.
So, Maria, I'm going to throw you one last question that's on the list. You guys have been way too prolific with your questions, so we're never going to get through them all. And then I'm going to toss it to each of you to kind of give a closing minute, because I'm watching the clock. Maria, in your world in procurement, this is particularly important. There's a real tension between purpose and profit. How do you balance it?
So at least for us, the near-term focus very clearly from our leadership is around cost efficiency, because we need to reinvest in the product, which will drive growth. But the way we also do it is to say, hey, are there projects that we're doing that can have kind of a dual impact? So like I mentioned, like with rubber gloves, for example, instead of just throwing them away, one is, you save the cost if you can reuse and recycle them, but the environmental impact is also great. Similarly, we're looking at like renewable energy. So it helps with the reliability challenges that we've had, at least in Europe, but it also helps you with your cost. And so at least our team is trying to find ways where we can kind of embed both of these things in what we do. But there is still a large part of what my team is working on, which is still purely cost focused. But I think, for us, we have kind of a 2030 target as well coming up. And so the way we are thinking about it is let's make the big push like this year and next. And then we'll start shifting back into thinking about how do we actually achieve these other goals, especially on the environment side where we can have a material impact. So for us, it's not so much this or that. We're trying to figure out where we can find the ands, and at least in the near term push on those. And then the things that are probably going to cost more, I think that's going to be a little further down the line.
Love that. Okay. So, Roger, we got 4 minutes left, which means we each get a minute on your market, set, go. Closing thoughts.
I'd say my closing thoughts are really just aspirational for the future. Only 17% of the SDGs have been achieved at this point, and we have a lot of work to do ahead. So whatever the policy is or whatever the technology is, we're going to use those to our ability to advance this agenda. And I always look at, the positivity in it all. There's a lot of disruption happening right now around the world in various ways. But there's also a huge opportunity for this next generation, for you as students, to advance this agenda better than we have. And we'd like to hand it off to you, when you're ready. And there's, again, utilizing this great technology, this AI that Scott was talking about and all of you know about. I think we're going to be able to accomplish so much more than we've ever been able to accomplish. We're going to get better data. We're going to get, the technology will allow us to hopefully create better equity around the world, although we have to be careful with that. We could talk about that for an hour in itself. But I think there's a huge opportunity. So don't let any of the noise in the system deter you from reaching out for your dreams and for what you'd like to do. ESG and impact is very much alive in the corporate and the global context, and it always will be. So go for it, and it's great to be here today.
Scott.
So two quick thoughts. I think one is every organization, it doesn't have to be a nonprofit. Every organization can do good and change the world. And I would challenge all organizations, my clients to included, but one leading by example thing that I'm proud of at McKinsey, if you go to mckinsey.org, right, we have a few years ago, we basically said, look, we have a couple of things that why not just give it out to the world? We're doing this anyway. It doesn't really cost us anything. So we have our Organizational Health Index, which I'm sure you remember very well. A2E, which is our capability building for when we're doing transformations for people. We said, why not just give this out to the world and allow people? And then a program called Forward that we innovated we created in the Middle East to help economic mobility. And we now give it out to anybody that wants to do it, right, to sign up. It's just an example of a contribution that any organization in the world, take a look at what you're doing anyway and what can you actually give out. I think the second thing is for the students in here. I am so excited for all of you. You're going to have many chapters in your career. Whatever you start off with in your first job is not going to be your last job. I would highly recommend go out there and learn the skills. Roger, you at the beginning when you're introducing yourself talked about how you're a lifelong consultant, and now you're going back and giving back right now that you have those. Go out there and get the skills so you can make a difference, and go find an organization that aligns with your values in which you can do well by doing good. Like, I love the HelloFresh example. Like, that's awesome. It's a consumer company. You're delivering great people, and you're doing good in the world.
So wonderful tee up, Maria. Couldn't have teed you up better.
Yeah, I think for me, I would encourage you all to think about where your skills and your strengths and passions are. There's different roles you can play. So you can play kind of in more of the traditional sustainability space, compliance reporting, data and analytics. You could expand that and say, hey, I want to get into procurement, and then it's thinking about supplier diversity or scope 3 and things like that. Or you could even think about, let's say, a P&L owner. Like, we have a division within HelloFresh called Green Chef, which is focused on food without pesticides and no GMOs and things like that, where you're actually driving an entire P&L. And I would think about where you get your energy from and which of those roles would actually give you the ability to have the most impact. But there's a lot to do. So.
Yeah, I'll close. I think the interesting thing for me is I loved how Scott teed up the various. I loved remembering my electric typewriter, but how he teed up the various phases we've been through. But we're sitting at a time in history that you're in a really unique position, because the influence you can have, the influence I could have with an electric typewriter transparently was not very big, right? It was a lot of stamps and a lot of letter writing, and then someone had to open the letter, and the post office had to deliver the letter. None of that was going to go well, right? Now, we know we have influencers on campus. You post something, and if it's the right thing, 2 million people are following you in weeks, right? Days, if it's dramatic enough. And I guess what I'm saying is you guys are sitting at a point that you get to change the world. So instead of what I think can happen, which is kind of, I don't want to say big corporate is bad. I mean, who gets up and says a consulting firm is good, right? We're all consultants. And absolutely, it would be a hard-won thing to say we are good. But I can tell you from both listening to these individuals and knowing the work we do, we are damn good, right? We're reaching for stars. We're using our money. I had a moment, and one little story before they kicked me off the stage. During COVID, during the Delta virus in India, there was it was one of the most awful things I've ever been through. And I was running procurement and workplace and everything else, and we were losing employees every day, and I would get the death notices. And we went to the CEO, and I said, Julie, we've got to do something. I mean, we're watching people die. We have to do something. And she said, well, what's the issue? Roll out our healthcare platform. We had a virtual healthcare. You could call a doctor. You didn't have to leave your house. They would get your prescription. But to do that, you needed a thermometer, you needed a pulse oximeter, and dear God, if the doctor said you needed an oxygen concentrator, where was one of those coming from? So I said to her, what are we going to do? She said, well, buy a healthcare kit for all of our employees. I said, okay, well, they've all got families. She said, okay, buy 5. So we did, and we rented planes, and we shipped in supplies to India. And then we knew what was coming to the next country, and we got there before it got there, because it was hitting South America after it hit India, and we got in there with the supplies ahead of time. And is it one of the greatest things I've ever been involved in? Absolutely. My point isn't really, weren't we heroes? My point is, these big companies get to change the world. And with your access to media and to 2 seconds on Instagram, you get to change the world. And doing it with the wealth and the power and the connection that these companies have makes you literally unstoppable. So leave here today, continue to rechart your path. Absolutely do not stay 36 years at one company. That is stupid and insane. So don't do that, okay? I don't know what I'd be doing if I'd left, but I tell my boy, I have 4 sons. One of them is actually at GW in the law school, and I tell them the same thing. Oh, he's in the back waving at me now. So don't do that, because that just throws me off my game, sweetie. The thing that you need to do is every 5 to 6 years, you need to go take a couple of weeks off, look in the mirror, have the conversation you can't have with anybody but yourself, and be honest. Am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Is this what I want to do? right? What is the thing I want to do? Does money matter? Does respect matter? Does power matter? Does green energy matter? Does buying things for people in a horrible situation matter? What is it that drives me? Have that conversation. And then with that conversation, readjust your plan. My husband calls it the plan check, right? Honey, check the plan. Is it the right plan? And keep checking your plan, because you are in a unique position in history. You can change the world. So thank you very much for having us all today.
Awesome. See you guys.